Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. All right, we're live. We're live. We're live. We're live. We're live on TikTok. We are live on YouTube. A few minutes early because I need to check all of the things and make sure they're working. But I hope everyone is well today. Are all the things working? Bit annoying that there's no way to actually check it on TikTok, which is really weird. It's not actually saying I'm live, but there we go. Anyway. Today I wanted to talk about go to market before product. Go to market before product. That's what I'm looking at. Now, I'm just going to talk for a bit and drink my coffee. It's 12. I'm still yawning. And yeah, for anybody joining, jump, ask a question. If you're looking to build and launch an app and monetize it, please do ask a question. I have been doing this for a very long time, and I'm able to help you on that journey. Now, what I have wanted to talk to you today is go to market for product. And yeah, go to market before product. That's where we're at. We've got a couple of minutes still. We'll hang on for a bit, and we'll see people sort of trickle in over time. I'm also live on YouTube as well, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's the journey we're going on. I've got this random bit of fabric. I don't even know what it's from. Seriously, don't know what that is. So yeah, let's hang on for a bit longer. Just a minute or so. And no one's really coming in at the moment. So yeah, what I wanted to talk about is go to market. Go to market before product. Go to market before product. Go to market before product. That's what I'm going for. It's really hard starting a stream. It's really difficult. But we muster through. So today we are going to talk about go to market before product when it comes to building and launching an app. And people are swinging by, but then they're leaving straight away. So there we go. All right, we're on the hour. So yeah, what I wanted to talk about was go to market before product. So very often we kind of look at building and developing an app in one strict way, in one strict order, which is we go off, we come up with an idea, we build an app, and then we market the app. Right, and then what kind of happens from that is that there's very little going on in terms of the release. Right, you kind of get to a point where you're like, okay, well, let's build this thing, let's release it, let's get to, let's hopefully people will come in and get involved, and they'll find their way. But it's not very effective, and people do feel this, people do experience this. It's not very effective, and it doesn't really go anywhere. And yeah, that's just down to the fact that they have not done any preparation work for that release. They find themselves in a position where, you know what, this doesn't make any sense. I go in and I build something and I launch it and I do build in public and I do, I post on Twitter and I post on Instagram and I do all the things, and yet none of it materializes. It doesn't turn into users. And this is sort of the problem. It worries about outputs rather than outcomes. And you end up in a place where you get no traction. You have no means to actually deliver the product into people's hands. And that's where people fall down. And that's where people find that they build these things. They spend months building apps. And yet they find themselves in a position where they don't have any users and they find it hard to justify continuing the project and they give up. And many times, I've spoken to folks who have built a product and built an app and built a product, built an app, done all these kind of things, and it doesn't really materialize into anything, and that's where people struggle, right? They struggle when it doesn't materialize. It's a difficult thing for a startup. Anyone who's looking to become a founder, it's a real struggle to sit there and say, you know what, I'm going to sit here and build something. I'm going to launch it. I'm going to do a bunch of marketing, and then I'm going to hope it's going to work. It's not the way forward. And the people who really succeed understand, or have just so happened to come across a situation where they build something, but they've done a lot of work beforehand in order to get a good launch campaign going, and therefore they get paid users into their apps. And this is something I've worked with my clients on when it comes to them launching their apps. It's a case of saying, look, we're not going to focus on just building something and then just chucking more and more marketing at it. It's a case of actually we need a good lead up. We need to be able to go from point A to point B and understand what's going to really push us forward come the launch date. So part of what I really want to focus on today is how do you do go to market before you do the product, right? Which often is the thing that's controversial and difficult within many people that I work with. They find it incredibly challenging to have that conversation and say, well, how do we do the marketing? How do we do the go-to-market before the product? But companies do this all the time. The World Cup is coming up and it's not for a little while yet. But is it a case that supermarkets just twiddle their thumbs and release their World Cup merch at the time when the tournament starts? No. They're starting to do that promo today. And that's the point, is that you want to get this promo done way beforehand so you can get to a point when you do release. It really helped that lift up. Okay, I got a question. I'm founding a SaaS startup as a non-technical person. Love your content. Have learned so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you saying that. It means a lot, honestly. I'm trying to get all the knowledge out of my head, all of the experience out into the world so people can take things away. I don't know if you came to a Tuesday Deep Dive before, but today I'm really kind of just talking about go-to-market and products, right? So a lot of what I do with my clients, first time, well, welcome. Feel free to ask any questions. I'm just going to babble until I get questions. That normally works. Like just sit here, just chatting until someone goes, "Oh, yeah, that's interesting." But yeah, I very much worked with startups for a long time. So my background is I worked in product and go to market. Well, I worked in product, and then loads of people weren't doing the go to market, so I had to do the go to market as well. But that's where my sort of career took off. And then when I did that for several years, I then went into the route of working for myself and building my own company. And that's where I became a consultant, where people would bring me in and say, hey, can you help me out with launching my products, right? And founding a company and doing all of these things. And since then, I've pivoted to really work with founders directly and say, right, okay, how do we get you in that first step? Because I do believe that independent technology needs to have a presence and needs to be within the system in order to innovate it faster. Part of the reason why you're feeling like a lot of streaming platforms and a lot of products are just kind of a bit trash is because there isn't this independent swell going around being able to kind of shape those things. We've just got these incumbents who are sort of determining everything, and that's the problem, right? So when it comes to market, go to market and product, why are those two things very different? Well, go to market really is just the means by which you say, okay, well, I can do things that are going to improve the odds when it comes to launching my product, right? That's all go to market is, right? It's literally what is the process of you going from where you are today and taking the product to the people who are most likely to be your best customers, right? What is that story? And that was the thing I used to work on loads with companies, was to say, look, okay, well, the story of taking your product to market is vitally important, and to a certain extent it's intrinsically linked to the product itself, but we can do a ton of go-to-market stuff before we build and develop the products in its own right. So how do you do that, right? That's the question. Now, if you're in a case of, do you know what, I want to build a fitness app for, you know, corporate Collins who are time poor and they're struggling to find, you know, a workout routine, trying to find out something like that, and that's the app you're building. Well, you can do the go-to-market beforehand by creating content focused around corporate Collins who are time poor, who need to work out, right? You can build a whole pipeline of social media, which is just, here is a workout routine for somebody who works in the corporate space and needs to have some form of workout routine, right? And that works. And this happened to a client of mine. So a client of mine, she built a travel app for women who are solo travelers. And she was sort of struggling to really work out how to launch and how to do the marketing and stuff. So I looked at her content and I said, your content's really good and you're doing really well, right? Just focus all your content solely on that one particular type of person, right? Just focus everything on that type of person and just do that. Don't talk about anyone else. Don't talk about any other cohort. Talk about this one type of person, somebody who is a woman, who is solo traveling. You know, what are good places to go? How can you find somewhere safe to stay? Where can you keep your luggage? Like all of those things, and just do that educational content and do that kind of stuff. You're really good at doing that. But as she started doing more and more of that, her social media started to grow more and more. And then she got to a point where she was like, oh, now I have access to my market. I am going to my market, right? I'm going to market. And now when she was able to then start to put her product together, there was a very easy way for her to put that product in people's hands, i.e. she's stacking the odds in her favor. And that's all go-to-market is, right? When you take a product to market, there is nothing you can do that is deterministic. Everything is probabilistic. So how are you going to stack the odds in your favor? That's the game. And this is what I work with people, well, my clients anyway, this is what I work on them with, is to put them in a position where the odds are stacked in their favor. So when they do launch campaigns and they go out and they start doing more marketing activities, they end up in a place where users come in and they start paying for their products. And all of my clients who directly pay for my services, they're all the same. They're all in a position where they're like, yeah, cool, I build my own software, I sell it, and that's my livelihood, right? And it's like, yeah, you should be able to do that. That's absolutely right. So I work with them, especially on the go-to-market and the product side of things, in order to understand that. Because the problem is that many people will build an app and their entire strategy will be, I'll build an app, I'll do build in public, I'll stick it on Product Hunt, maybe do a couple of tweets, and then hope for the best. And then it doesn't go anywhere. And it's like, is it any surprise? You just did some activities after you built it. Where your launch should be this big moment, right? It should be this big, huge moment, but it can't be a big moment if you don't have an audience. So you have to build the audience. You have to get people into the same space, and it has to be the same type of person, right? The same type of person who is very likely to be your customer, very likely to take away value from what you're doing, and very much aligned with your brand. Right, and you can do all that work without a product. So do that first and then come into it. So, you know, I've got people sort of dropping in and out. So I'm just going to go and switch over to my screen because I've put together a bit of a cadence that you could have in the things that you do from my experience working with customers. Is this the most I can zoom in? It is. That's really annoying. I'm going to have to do something else. Right, okay. So what I've done is that I've taken different initiatives and said, okay, so out of all of these initiatives, when it comes to building and releasing an app, these initiatives are things that you can do, but these are the lead times for when you start to get results. Okay, this is what's important. This is when you start. It takes time on some of these things. And I've ordered them from the longest to the shortest, so that you can have some kind of cadence of what you do over the next, say, 5 to 6 months. Okay. So let me just do this and hopefully, no, let's do that. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Right. So social media takes 6 months to get any results. Right. And that's just, yeah, the way it is. Hang on. I'm actually going to do this and mess up my setup to make this more visible. Okay. Let's put that there. Like so. And let's move my head on top of that like that. Okay, cool. Right. So social media, let's put that as another thing. Social media takes around about 6 months to yield any results. Okay. And that's just the way it is. And the reason that happens is down to the algorithm, right? Because when you go on social media and you start doing social media campaigning, the algorithm doesn't know where to send your content, right? It looks at you and goes, I don't know who you are, and I kind of don't really know what the content is, and I don't know who it's for. So it takes time for it to learn exactly who that's going to go to, because what a social media platform like TikTok is trying to do is to make sure that people stay in app as much as possible. So it needs to deliver the exact right content to people. That's its goal, right? To send the exact right content to the exact right people. So it doesn't really know how to do that, and it takes a bit of time to get there. So you sort of see social media doesn't really yield any results for around about 6 months. Okay. Now I post every day, sometimes several times a day, and it took me around about 6 months to get my first client from TikTok. Right. So it takes time. It takes about 6 months. The next is brand trust and awareness. Now, when we talk about branding, what we're talking about really, it's not about fonts, it's not about typography, it's not about assets, it's not about color schemes, right? It's about how people feel about you. Most importantly, do they trust you enough that they're going to buy from you? That's what brand trust does. And you need to build that trust, but at the same point, you have to build awareness. And that takes about 6 months as well. Okay? And that's what a lot of people end up falling down on, right? They don't really go in and do the work in order to build that brand trust. So when it comes to them then saying, hey, buy my product, and people don't buy it, they're like, well, I don't know why people don't buy it. It's like, because they don't trust you, right? They just don't trust you. You haven't done the work to build that trust. So that's where you end up in that position. Next is community building, right? And community building takes 4 to 5 months, right? You know, if you're good at it, it will take 4 months. If you've never done it before, then it's going to take a little bit longer, because you're going to have to learn, all those things. And community building is important from a point of view of if you're building a community app, right? If you're building an app for people to come together with a shared purpose, then you're going to have to do community building beforehand. And that can happen off your app, right? You can start to build community on Slack or on Discord or on Reddit, depending on what your type of product is going to be. Find the closest allegory and start building the community there. Once you've done that, then you can bring people over, right? And it also gives you a very clear access into how you can take your product to market, put it in their hands, right? So if you're not building a community app, then let's just put this also as audience, right? Audience building. And this is the case, right? Is that you're going to have some kind of audience. You're going to have some kind of method that you can turn up and other people will show up for you, right? And that's where you get to this point. But that takes 4, maybe 5 months, right? It takes a while to get there, because this is a big part of community and audience building is 1, realizing the purpose behind it, and 2, the familiarity. And this is what I do on my TikTok, right? Where I come along and I say, right, this is the one thing I talk about, right? How do I help software developers become technical founders? And I just drill that over and over again. Once people realize that's the purpose, then they start showing up again and again and again, right? So that's sort of part of community and audience building. Once you kind of get past that, you want to get into authority building, right? And this can take 4 months. And if you're doing SaaS, going back to, I can't remember the name of the user who did pop a message saying they're building a SaaS startup. But authority building becomes a really important part of this, right? Authority building is saying, oh, this person knows this thing, right? They're known for that thing. And this links into the brand as well. And somebody, I was lucky enough to have a brand strategist who actually worked at Apple. So that was like a massive, I stole so much knowledge from her. It was unreal. But she always said to me, like, if you make a nice cheese toastie for someone once, you had a nice lunch. If you make a nice cheese toastie every single, 3 times a week, you're the cheese and toastie guy, right? So how are you the cheese and toastie guy for the person that you're trying to sell to, right? For the person who wants cheese toasties. And that's what authority building does, right? So you do it, you sort of do proof by doing, right? So you kind of go off and you kind of say, right, I do this thing myself and this is how I did it. And I'm sharing that knowledge. But also you do it from a point of view of, I have some kind of history in this thing, right? I've been, for me personally, it's simply because I've been doing product and go to market for such a long time, right? And for other folks, one of my clients, she's building an app for hair salons and hairdressers and hairstylists. She's just been doing that for a long time. So she has that authority, but you need to communicate that authority in a way that people are willing to listen. So authority building takes about 4 months because people want to make sure that you just didn't go off and learn like 2 or 3 talking points and are repeating yourself. And I guarantee you folks here in this live right now, you've experienced that, right? Where you sit there and you go, oh, this person, oh, they know this thing. But then you watch their stuff over a longer period of time and you're like, hang on a minute, they're basically saying the same thing over and over and over again. Like they know like 2 or 3 talking points and that's it, right? There's a lot of people in the financial advice space who are like that, right? Where they are like, oh yeah, we know how to do this. Oh, if you're doing this, then do this, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's what happens. So the next part of this is finding your voice, right? Or the messaging, right? That takes about 3 months. And this is when you're trying to realize what your vernacular is, right? What is the vocabulary? What are the words that you use? What are the phrases that you use? This is what drives you in your thing. It's Nike's Just Do It, right? It's McDonald's I'm Loving It, right? And McDonald's I'm Loving It is a great example of messaging, because the reason that came about was because people kept seeing McDonald's as a guilty pleasure, right? And that was sort of bad for their brand. That people were like, yeah, I'm going to go for a McDonald's, but I kind of don't want to admit it. And that was a very clear thing in the 90s, that people were like, oh yeah, I kind of don't want to go to McDonald's. I'm kind of a bit embarrassed that, what I want to do is go for a McDonald's. It's not seen as a place to go for lunch, right? It's a place for kids' parties. That's what it is. And so they kind of shaped their marketing campaign around that one phrase, I'm loving it, right? Because McDonald's were like, look, if you love it, you love it. Don't be shy about it. If you love it, you love it. That's great. That's fantastic. Do that. And now they're starting to do the same thing, because they've got the McCrispy, and then they're talking. The ad campaign is it's something along the lines of betray your go-to, or something along those lines. It's like people go to McDonald's and keep all of the same thing, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff that they could try and they never do, right? And so their now new ad campaign does that. So messaging plays this really important part. It contextualizes your product and the philosophy behind your product in a way that people can understand why they would purchase from you. And this is what messaging is. People understand why they will buy from you, and that's tough. That's really difficult, actually. By all means, do not go to an LLM and ask it to give you messaging and copy, right? It will give you something very average. What you want is something spectacular, right? To be able to say, right, that is the messaging that works. Right, if I say these words, people will have some reaction that I need, which gives them the reason to why they would want to purchase from me. That is what messaging and finding your voice is. Right, what is your voice in it? And this is also why a lot of brands do deals with certain brand people, right? Because they reflect their particular brand. Where they're like, oh, this celebrity, they often play a role which is quite luxurious. They always play the rich entrepreneur on screen, so therefore, as we are a luxury product, it makes sense for them to do it, because the messaging coming from them lends a bit of weight. So an example of this is George Clooney, who was the face of Nespresso, right? A great example of that, right? It's the message. It's all in messaging, right? So that takes about 3 months, right, to get that right, because you have to try lots of different things and you have to go out and talk to people and figure out how it's going to work. But it takes around about 3 months to do that and to get it in a place where it's giving you minimal benefits, is the way that I'll put it. The next is marketing testing and analysis. So this is the bit I used to do loads on, and I sort of do less of it today, and I'm kind of glad, because it's tiresome. It can take a lot of work, but you don't have to do loads of it in the beginning, thankfully. And market testing and analysis is where you're going to say, right, okay, when I say market, what I want you to get out of your head is this sort of vague kind of blob that we think of markets, which is it's a part of a system. It's not. A market is just the group of people who are most likely to become your customers. That's what the market is. That's all it is. And when we go say market testing, it's like, right, okay, I need to know what is that group of people, what is their propensity to purchase, what is their likelihood to buy something, and what's their likelihood to buy something specifically from me, right? And that's what you're really testing for. Now, we kind of go in this place of like talking about, and this is what I kind of get a bit annoyed with sometimes, is we look at sort of market analysis and how we do market, sort of break down the market and do the testing from a perspective of, well, really it's like pop culture economics. That's how we view markets, right? We talk about supply and demand. We talk about blah, 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 blah. That shit don't matter, right? It does not matter. What matters is there is a group of people who have the highest propensity to purchase from specifically me. How do I test that they exist? And how do I test the ability to put products in their hands? And that's what you're testing for. And that's what market testing and analysis is, right? I can turn around and say, well, I know these people exist. How much money are they willing to put up in order to solve their problems? And what problems can I solve for less than that money? That's essentially the whole game, right? Now, the next one is online outreach. And this takes about 2 months, right? So this is direct outreach. So this is email, this is DMs, right? And sometimes it's comments as well. In fact, put comments in there as well. This is how you're going to go out and get in front of people and talk to them directly via online means. And this takes a couple of months to get going, because you don't really know. The problem with online is, yes, you can kind of reach a lot of people, but also there's lots of places. So which places are going to be effective for you? You don't know, right? A LinkedIn DM is going to be effective for you, maybe. Our TikTok DM is going to be useful for you. Our Instagram DM is going to be useful for you. Maybe. You don't know. So you kind of have to do a lot of experimentation in this space, where you're just going into, creating content, but also creating followership, and then starting to send messages out to see, well, who bites, who has interest, who wants to talk about, what I have on offer. And that's part of the online outreach piece of it. And it takes about 2 months with experimentation to get there. But once you get there, you kind of get a realization of how you need to approach it and how you need to talk to people. The mistake that people make is that they will automate and optimize their email campaigns and A/B test them to death until you get to a point where it just doesn't work, right? And that happens all the time, and I see it too many times as well. So that's what the online outreach does. You do a lot of it manually to start off with, and you'll start to figure out what works and what doesn't work. The problem with automating too quickly, and especially using AI, is that the moment people sniff that's what's going on, it hurts your brand. Really, really hurts your brand. And I had it recently. I was on LinkedIn, and I was having a conversation with somebody, and I think I said like 2 things. And then I was looking, and I was like, every reply has like the same structure to it. And I was like, that's interesting. It kind of had something complimentary. Then it had a little bit more in depth in what the thing I said was. And then it asked me a question that was related to the thing that I said. And I was like, So I tested it out by saying something completely random. And it came back with the exact same format. And somebody who would actually be talking to me wouldn't have given me that answer. And what did I do? I unfollowed them immediately. I got rid of the connection and I unfollowed them, because I was like, I feel cheated that I had to talk to a robot. right? And that's how people feel. So it can hurt your brand if people sniff it too much. So you want to be able to, do that manual piece with the online outreach. The next is the launch campaign. And this takes 2 months. Now, the launch campaign is when you build your app and you're looking to release it, you need to be able to say, right, how do I effectively, it's another way of saying, how do I knock on doors, right? So if you're a politician looking to get elected, you go knocking on doors and you go talking to people to give them reasons for them to vote for you. Well, a launch campaign is effectively the same thing, right? It's just an abstract version of it, right? How are you going to go knock on doors to say, hey, here's my thing, you're definitely going to want to pay for this, right? And that kind of looks very different for very different things, and also that's relative to the type of customer and the product itself. So for one of my clients who is looking to sell to the airline industry, his launch campaign that we put together was just one of really pointing out the friction and the bottlenecks when it comes to running an airline company, right? That they're in a position where they've been over corporatized, there's too much middle management, and things just can't move quickly. And I said, let's lean on that more, right? That's our campaign. How annoying is it that the middle managers get in your way when you want to do something simple? As we start to push that campaign and around that idea, then people start to gravitate towards him, and he just got his first customer, who is Cathay Pacific, and he's like, this one customer literally pays my wage for a year and a half. And I was like, there you go, happy days. Now you can just get down and focus on getting it right and doing more campaigns and figuring out what that looks like. And then last on the list, which takes about a month, is in-person outreach. Right, and this is where we're going to be in a position where you're going to events, you're going to conferences, you're putting on events yourself, right? You're putting on meetups, and you're doing direct in-person stuff, and you're talking very directly to them. And this has a much better conversion rate than online. And this is something that gets forgotten, is that not only does in-person have a higher conversion rate than online, but it actually has a wider reach than you think it does. And this is often the mistake I find people make. I was contracted to an e-commerce company. They were a SaaS platform, and what they did was to effectively, it was sales attribution, right? And it was all e-commerce store owners and that kind of thing. And they were doing all of these kind of SEO and email campaigns and all this stuff, and all of it was falling flat. The whole thing was falling flat. And I turned around to the whole team, the whole marketing team, and I said, who have you talked to in the last month? Right? Have you got in front of somebody who could potentially be a customer? Like, how many times have you done that? The answer was 0. It's like, how do you expect to sell to these people if you don't talk to them? Right? And what ended up happening was, and I was brought on board for product, I went to a conference of e-commerce store owners and just talked to them, right, and had a conversation. That brought in more customers than the entire marketing team, which led to the CMO getting fired, because they were just like, how the hell has Dom gone out for a couple of days and dragged in all of these new users, new paying customers, and he just went out for a day, and you've been doing this for 6 months and we haven't got anything, right? And that's what happens, right? So the in-person has massive impact. You have a higher conversion rate, but also on the other side of it, it has wider reach than you think it does. Because when you talk to those people, they're more likely then to recommend your product or your service to someone else if you've had that close touch point, right? If they get across, if you sit there and go, actually, Dom's like me, right? And he talks like me, and he comes from the same place I come from, and he has the same values, then that person is more likely to turn around and say, hey, I think this thing is great, right? I think what Don does is brilliant. You should totally check him out. And that happened on LinkedIn this week. Like, somebody I don't know wrote in a comment of somebody else's post saying, I think you need to go talk to Don because he does this stuff specifically. And it's like, okay. I was like, right, okay. And that's a person I met for 20 minutes at an event, I think maybe 4 months ago. That's the power of in-person. So do not let it down. So if you are looking to build and monetize an app, then this is a cadence that you can do your go-to-market, and this is before you even have a product, right? That's the big thing that I want to go here, is that the product launch, comes at the end here, right? This is the product launch, right? And you are, there we go, product launch. And this is the product launch at the end. Now, the reason I stacked it this way, and that these lead times, as I mentioned, this is minimum useful results, right? So these are outcome. This is when it gives you an outcome that's actually useful to you, right? Okay, that's the lead time I've put here, 6 months. Okay, so if you do it in this order, then all of these things will coincide with your product launch. And that gives you the best chance possible when you launch for people to come along and buy your product, right? You're going to start to see the social media starts to kick in, the brand trust starts to kick in, the community starts to kick in, all of these things kick in at around the same time, which is your product launch. And once you've done that, then you're ready to sort of say, right, now I've launched my product, I can get users in. And this is a way that you can get to a point of saying, well, now I can start making money from this. Rather than doing it upside down, which is to launch a product and then try and do all this stuff retroactively, that doesn't work, right? You just have people trickling in over time. And that's the point. This is where I have succeeded the most with my clients, is to build this cadence and kind of go through it and say, right, okay, well, we know this thing isn't ready for 6 months, so let's start today. And then if that's going to hit its peak in 6 months, then we're going to get into that place. So if I visually represent this, right, let me just open up my Excel real quick. So to really, to visually explain this, let's get rid of that. To visually explain this, like, this is like a timeline, right? And where is... Okay, cool. So this is going to be the effectiveness right here, the effectiveness of your campaign. And this is time, right? And mostly this is 6 months, okay? So the idea is that when you do social media, right, at this effectiveness at this level here is going to be an outcome that is useful to you, okay? So that's a useful outcome. And if you're doing social media, it's going to do, let's go with a thinner line for that. It's going to do that, right? That's the line for social media, right? Doing community building, audience building, all of that stuff, that takes that amount of time. So like so. And then you have something else like so. So if you time your product release at that moment there, then it's going to rocket upwards. And that's basically my job. That's what people pay me to do, is to do that. And this is where you're going to see results come in. So you're going to want to start these things in this cadence in order to get there, right? And that cadence is this. So that's all you need to know. Maybe you need to screenshot this. Don't screenshot it. It's cool. Do it. But yeah, this is where we come through with it. And yeah, this is go to market before the product. And remember, like, go to market and marketing, the product is only one spoke in the wheel. There's so many other things that need to go on in order to make that work. So don't think you have to have a product in order to do your marketing or do your go to market. You don't have to, right? There's so many other things that you can do as well that are going to help you when it comes to product launch. So yeah, any questions, please do stick them in the chat. I'm more than happy to answer them. Like, I'm going to be online for another 25 minutes. So by all means, stick a question in the chat if you've got one, because I just blabber until somebody asks me something. So that is the cadence. That is the go-to-market cadence. a go-to-market first cadence, shall we say. Let's do that because that makes more sense. And yeah, that's worked very, very well for me. And to a certain extent, like, you can go back and look at my TikTok and see how I've actually been employing this very much myself. Community building, audience building, brand trust, social media. That's the stuff I've been doing on my TikTok. But then I go over to my LinkedIn. I do a lot more authority building. I do a lot more, messaging and kind of stuff like that. And I'm constantly in DMs talking to people, right? And that's sort of that part of it. So this gives you some structure to what you want to do. It doesn't give you an exact framework. I don't really believe in exact frameworks. I think those things can lead you down the wrong road. But that's where we are on that one. And I've gone down to 0. 0 viewers. 0 viewers. Oh, the joy of live streaming. But I hope people got some value out of that anyway. I've got some likes, which is nice. I don't know if I've got no follows. But yeah, we'll hang on and see if anyone else turns up. What I need to do is view the live stream. Oh, I've got people come back in. All right. Hello, everybody. How are you doing? Yeah, we are talking go-to-market before product. And as everybody's new back in, so let's kind of have a chat about that. So the idea behind this is to have a go-to-market cadence before the product. And this is the cadence that I use quite often with my clients, but it was something I learned doing product management and go-to-market for 2 startups that became unicorns. And the whole point of it is that you can do a lot of things before the launch that will help your launch, put you in a position basically where you can get paid customers. It's important to understand on the go-to-market side of things that there's nothing you can do that's deterministic. Nothing you can do is deterministic when you take a product to market. Everything is probabilistic. So the aim of the game is to stack the odds in your favor. And this particular cadence is there to say this will help you stack the odds in your favor. So when you get to your launch, you're going to have the best chance possible of putting the product in people's hands and having them buy from you. That's the point. That's the whole gist behind this whole thing. So part of what I've been going through in the session, happy to go through it again, is this cadence here. These are all the initiatives that you can do, and this is the lead time before you get some useful outcome out of it. So by putting them in this order, if you did this over the next 6 months, you would find yourself in a position where you've set yourself up with the best odds possible, right? So when you kick off, you can do social media. That takes 6 months. It just takes time to do social media, right? It's not instant, being able to sort of release something and use social media as your platform to get users in. It takes 6 months. It's not quick at all. So you want to start that first, and that goes for brand trust and awareness as well. Okay, you're going to want to do this 6 months before you launch, right? Because this builds trust, it builds awareness, and it means people know who you are and are willing to buy from you. And that's why you want to do that stuff earlier. It just takes the longest, but it does a lot of the lifting for you. And that's why you want to be in a position of doing those things first. Next, I've got community building and audience building. This is a case, especially if you've got a community app, you're going to want to build that community first and take the app to them. Trying to build the app and bring the community to you is very, very tough. And most probably you don't have the resources to do that. So what you want to do is basically say, okay, then, well, how can I build that community first? You can do it in a space like Discord or Reddit or Slack. If you're doing B2B, then Slack is a good place to do that. But you want to do those things in a way so you're able to say, right, I'm going to build community in this space and be able to say, okay, well, I've built that community and I've fostered it. I've given them a shared purpose, and now I can take the product to them. Right. And that's, if you're not a community app, then you want to focus on audience, right? You want to build an audience who are going to show up whenever you do something. And that takes like 4 or 5 months to do To get a useful result from that takes 4 or 5 months. So you're not going to want to be in a position where you're just like, okay, we're going to do these things in the moment, because it's not going to yield results for you. And the problem is that with these first three, especially these first three, if you do the product first and then you start trying to do these things, people feel like you're trying to shill them, right? And then it becomes harder to build that brand trust, right? Build the brand trust first and take the product to them. Don't build the product and then try to shape the brand trust around it. It's very, very difficult to do that. And if you've got the money to burn to build the brand strategists and pay for advertising and do all the rest of it, by all means, that's going to work. But most likely you're going to be an independent founder. You're going to be by yourself, or you're going to be a small team. You will not have that resource at hand. So build the trust first, do the awareness, then do the product and take the product to them. Now, after this, I've got authority building. This is where we're going to be in a position where we say, okay, well, we need to be an authority on the subject. We need to be the person who's the right person to do this type of thing. I had a client, she was doing a lot of travel blogging, and she was mainly talking from a place where she said, oh, well, I want to build this app, and I wanted to build it for women who are solo traveling. Right. And she was trying to figure out what her go-to-market was going to be. And originally she was coming to me to talk about like promoted, ads and promoted posts. Right. And I said, look, don't worry about that. Like, you kind of got an audience already. You just need to build authority with them. Once you've done that, it's going to click. And what she started to do was to shape her content around this one idea. If you are a woman and you are a solo traveler and you're young, often it was women in their gap year, right? She was like, these are things you need to know, right? Take these things with you. Go to these places. These places are safe, right? She was doing all this content. And as people started to understand the authority, because she was like, I've been solo traveling for 10 years, they were like, well, I'm going to listen to her, right? Because she's me, right? Her today, that's me in 10 years time. I want to be her in 10 years time. So I'm going to listen to her. She was building authority. And once she did that, we then said, right, okay, now you've kind of got a sense of around about 1,000 or 2,000 people in that space. Now release the product. And when she did that, she started getting paid users in immediately, because that was exactly what people were looking for. And those people were already primed and they had that authority. They understood. That links back to the brand. Right? So her brand, that authority piece links back to the brand, so people trust her and they have the awareness. But then when you take the product to them in that way, then they have a greater propensity to purchase from her and from you for what you're doing. So figure out what that is. Next, for sort of takes like 3 months, is messaging and finding your voice. Right? So messaging really kind of sets up the stage to give people a reason for why they would buy from you. Right? Very often as well, especially if you're on B2B, but very often you will find people would have made a decision that they want to buy your product or a similar product quite quickly. But what they need to do is justify the purchase over a period of time. And this is where messaging comes in, right? Where you might be in a case of like, okay, people get that they need to buy this particular product for me and that it's going to be very useful for, say, their productivity, right? But they don't quite make a buying decision. They made a decision that that's something they want, but they haven't made a buying decision. So what messaging does, it helps push along the way to say, this thing will save you time. This thing will make you more productive. This thing will help you get more things that you get done so you can do the things you want to do. That's the stuff that really drives you forward in that place. So that's the messaging and finding your voice. And that takes about 3 months, because you have to do a lot of experimentation in this stuff. And the next one as well, market testing, is exactly the same. There's just so much experimentation that you have to spend time on it. And this is where people fall flat, right? Do not go to an LLM and type in, give me copy for my marketing messaging, and then go with that, because it's going to give you something average, but you need to do something spectacular. And that's not going to happen via an LLM. Right, you need to talk people in a way that emotively moves them, and that is where the messaging comes in. That makes people feel something. So to move to the next one, market testing and analysis, this takes 2 to 3 months. I used to do loads of this stuff, and I'm kind of glad I don't do so much of it anymore, because it's quite tough. It's really tough actually. But basically, when we talk about the market, the thing I really want you to leave out your head is that the market is not just some part of a system. It's not some blob. It's not some amorphous, vague concept, right? It is people. It is the group of people who are most likely to become your customers. That is your market. And you have to test, one, they exist, and two, they have a propensity to purchase, and three, that you can actually get to them, right? And that's what market testing does. And you're going to send out lots of little experiments in order to figure that out. And it's not a case of like, you can use the product as an experiment. Yes, you can, right? But if you're in a position where you're like, actually, the product's not going to be ready for 3 months, well, then find other ways to test that, right? Find other ways to test your market before your product is ready. That's often the mistake people make, is that they find themselves in a position where they do just come in and they say, right, I've got my product. Do you want it or don't you want it? And then they take that as validation or not validation. Well, in actual fact, you can put other little things out there to see, well, do people actually respond to that stuff? Do they actually give us some kind of feedback? And once you start doing all these little experiments here and there, you start to see, oh, it's interesting that when we do stuff that saves money, it doesn't really click. When we do stuff that saves time, it does. That means it moves your market into a slightly different area, but it also it may well pivot your product into a different space. So that's sort of the next bit of it. The next part is online outreach. And this is sort of DMs and email, mostly. Comments as well on social media posts. That's another part of online outreach that people don't realize. I've actually won a client this year because of a comment that I wrote in somebody else's post. Like, the comments is definitely a means of outreach. And that takes about 2 months. And that's because, this comes from the messaging, right, and the market testing. This all feeds into the online outreach, but this takes a little bit longer because when someone meets you online, there's a little bit more trepidation into whether they should buy from you if they meet you online only. So you've kind of got this longer lead time that you have to go back and forth a little bit more. You have to have conversations. You have to, deliver a little bit of value first, maybe, and then get to that point where it actually turns to something useful. And again, this is a lead time to a useful outcome for you. And you kind of get to that, and you have to find, you have to figure out what are the words that I need to use to actually get people to that place where they're ready to make a buying decision. Next is the launch campaign. Now, when we say launch campaign, this is merely just saying what effectively is knocking on doors, right? If you're a politician, you're looking to get votes, right? You go out, you knock on doors, you say, look, this is a great reason to vote for me. Well, a launch campaign for a product is very similar, right? Abstractly, it's the same thing. It is, how are you going to get in front of people and knock on their door and say, hey, I have figured out that you're going to be a great customer of mine. Brilliant. Now, how do we make that happen? How do we get to that place, right? And the launch campaign does that. So for me, I'm doing a launch campaign on an app that I'm building, right? And a big part of it is to go out and do a lot of in-person events. But two is to actually do a lot of hand-holding. So webinars comes into my launch campaign because I basically do a lot of hand-holding in the whole process and then say, right, that's what you need to do. You probably realize that's a pain, so you can just use my product, right? And I haven't even built anything, right? And I have people saying to me, hey, how do I get your product? Where is it? How do I buy it? And I'm like, I haven't built it yet. But just doing this pre-stuff already gets people kind of like interested and locked in to say, yeah, actually, this is the thing I need. So that's where I go with that one. And that takes about 2 months, right? Because you're going to have to constantly reiterate. The part of the launch campaign will be you reiterating the problem over and over and over again. You need to reiterate the problem. And that's how you sort of win people over. People want to know that you're the right person to solve their problems. And that's from a position of you understand their problem, you empathize with them experiencing the problem, and that's why you brought the solution to the table. It takes about 2 months for people to buy that and go, okay, yeah, all right, yeah, you are that person, fair enough. So, that's why launch campaigning often takes like 2 months, and I always put 2 months to it. Sometimes I put 3 just to be sure, but you can do it in 2 if you really put your mind to it. And the last one is in-person outreach. It takes about a month, and that's going to events, going to conferences. So if you've got a conference season if you're building an app and your customer has a particular a conference that goes on at a particular time of year, right? So for tech, it's this time of year, right? June is sort of late May, June is sort of the tech sort of season. I know there's a season as well for like people who are into home refurbishment, right? That's another season. But this is where much of the in-person stuff happens. And in-person is really important. There's some things I want you to understand about in-person outreach, and I love it. But first of all, the conversion rate is way higher than online. right? Because people meet you. And at the end of the day, people buy from people. So in person is so key to that. Your conversion rates are going to be much higher if you do things in person. Second of all is that you're probably underestimating the reach that you get from in person, right? And that happens because, for example, I met somebody 4 months ago, right? We had a chat for like half an hour, just having a little conversation, blah, 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 blah. I got to a point where last week, he put a comment under somebody else's post saying, you need to go talk to Dom because he knows this stuff really well. From a half an hour conversation, and I met him 4 months ago, and I've literally never talked to him since. That's the power of in person. You would never get that online. But when people meet people in person, they have a different type of relationship. So the in-person stuff, higher conversion rates, higher reach. You can't hit massive numbers, but it does help you figure out it helps feed into the campaign so that gets in the right place. And that takes about a month. And the whole point is that I've put it in this order, is that if you're looking to launch something in 6 months' time, this is the cadence that you want to have over time. So all of these minimal useful results that comes from all of these initiatives all coincide for the product launch, right? That's what we're looking for, is coincide with the product launch. Blip. There we go. And that's where it all coincides to. This is where we're all heading towards. And then all those things then hit a moment, and then it lifts you up from that point. To show that visually, let me just do this and bring this over here. So to show that visually, if I have a graph like this, right, and this is time, and this is, the effectiveness. This is what I'm talking about when I say, useful outcomes, right? Okay, that's the moment you have useful outcomes. And this limit here, let's say here, is, that's awful. Let's do that. So that line here is when that actually is useful to you in a way that it gives you a purchase, right? Oh, I've gone off screen a little bit. This is useful for you to when you get a purchase, right? The idea is that social media takes like 6 months. Oh, let's make that a little bit thinner. Social media, audience building, brand trust and awareness takes 6 months. So we go like this, blah, 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 up to here. Okay. And this time here, this is 6 months. Okay, cool. You then do all the other stuff, and that comes in and that grows up, and then that gets to a point where it's useful here. Okay. Doing all the in-person stuff, right? Doing the online outreach, doing the launch campaign here, right? So in the end, when you hit this moment here, when you launch at this point, then it's going to lift you up. All those things are going to coincide at the same moment, and it's going to push the product up, and that's going to help you get users into your product. And this is what I did for over a decade of my life, right? Working with startups that eventually became unicorns, and then going out and building up my own startup consultancy. This is what I did with people, was to say, don't be focused on building a product and then chucking marketing stuff at it. Do a ton of the go-to-market work beforehand, so that when you get to a launch, all of those elements push you up, so that it gives you the best chance possible. The phrase that I keep coming back to is, when you go to market, when you take a product to market, nothing is deterministic. Everything is probabilistic. The aim of the game is to stack the odds in your favor, and doing these different initiatives at the exact right moment will help stack the odds in your favor. That all of these things will start to kick in at the same time, and therefore lift the product up, and that will give you the best odds and the best chance possible. So when that launch campaign finally hits and the launch is happening, boom, you're off to the races. And that's the go-to-market cadence. So feel free to screenshot that and do that. I do this because I truly, truly believe that independent technology is the future. And we do need more independent tech, because we've got too many big incumbent companies who are doing, very bad things, and just kind of, really kicking the legs from under the entire industry for everybody else. So I'm here to help people just make a few good decisions in go-to-market and product, so that their products can succeed. All right. And that's what I want. I want the tech industry to be a little bit more punk a little bit more anti-establishment, a little bit more, two fingers to the elites, and to say, you know what, we can build tech, we can do it just fine. We did it the first time, so there we go. I'm glad you found that useful. It's over on my YouTube, some of my past lives. I don't know how to share that here. I'll pop you. I don't know if I'm following you. If I'm following you, I'll pop you a message. What happened to my voice there? So what happened when you talk very fast for an hour? I will. Let me just chuck you a follow. I'll chuck you my past lives. They're over in YouTube. It's very sort of all over the place because I did live streaming on a whim, and then it turned out to be quite good. So I was like, oh, okay, that works quite nice. But yeah, I will chuck that over to you as well. Coming up to time now. Like, we're going to be ending the live stream, but I'm here every Tuesday. All right, every Tuesday I'm here just answering questions, talking about go-to-market ideas, talking about product, talking about how to basically build your product and get it out into the world and get paying customers. That's it. That's what I do. And I've been doing it for over a decade, and I'm very good at it. People pay me a lot of money for it, put it that way. So, I want to keep doing this. So do please come along, say hi. If you've got questions, ask. I'm more than happy to answer those questions about how do you get paid users. More than happy to answer those questions if you've got them. And I'm here every Tuesday, 12 o'clock UK time. And 12 o'clock UK time. And I just talk go-to-market products for new technical founders who are looking to build and monetize their apps. But that is a quick breakdown of my go-to-market first cadence. It's been very successful for me. Very successful. My last client that I worked for as a startup consultancy, we ended up in a position where we did sort of. I ended up having to the CMO, the fractional CMO, got sacked because no results were coming out of them. But I was doing this. I just did this for 6 months. I had my own little team for myself, and I did this for 6 months. And I was bringing more paid users in the entire marketing department. And that's because, again, we were setting ourselves up for success. We were giving ourselves the best odds possible. And that's the point. You're stacking the odds in your favor. That's the game you play. And it's a very different game you play rather than trying to just throw more marketing at it. The other thing I found as well when I was consulting with startups is the egregious amount of money that's thrown at marketing agencies. It's a big mistake. All those agencies want to do is take your money. That's it. They don't care if your product succeeds or not. They just want to take your money. And if you fail, then they'll just turn around and go, well, that's your fault. Bad times. But thanks for the money. See you later. I had a company who brought me on board. They were trying to do a social media app kind of based around sports and competitiveness and stuff like that. They were paying something close to 50 grand on a marketing agency over like 6 months. And, we went to them and said, look, can we get some beta users? Like, we need people into the product quite early. So can you go and get them? And for like 2 months, they brought us 3 people. And I was like, this is terrible. Like, you're paid 50 grand. If you give me 50 grand, I'll go get you a whole bunch of people if you give me 50 grand. Why are you paying these people 50 grand? And they kept making excuses and talking about all this kind of stuff. And I was like, right, I'm sick of this. And I literally just went out of my house, right? Paddington is not that far from me, right? It's a good 40-minute walk. So I went down to Paddington. There's Paddington Recreation Ground. And do you know what people are doing there? They're playing sports. I went down there and I just talked to people, had conversations with them. And I brought around about 200 beta testers in by doing that like 3 times a week for a month. And I was like, there you go. There's the beta testers. And they were like, what are our marketing department doing? What is marketing agency doing? Taking your money. That's what they're doing. They don't care. They're just taking your money. They're good at marketing one thing, themselves. That's it. So, but that's part of, again, in-person outreach, right? That takes about a month. Yeah. 2-3 times a week, I'll go down to Paddington Recreation Ground, talk to people who are kicking football around, playing sports, and saying, hey, this is a chance for you to to, you know, we're building this app, and you can, you know, meet with other people, do competitions, blah 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 blah. And they ended up going. Well, actually, the last thing I did for them was actually to hire the person to replace me. So they actually just got someone permanently on board rather than just me consulting. But, you know, one of the last things I did was to put together a sports day. All right. And so let's get a bit of nostalgia. Let's kind of connect with millennials and say, let's put on like a little school sports day, but for adults. And then to enter the sports day, you had to use the app. And the idea that I said I wanted to do is like do that a couple of times, then we could do it over the country. And then everyone collectively can essentially be in the same sports day through the app, using the feature in the app to be able to say, oh, we're all on this thing. So if it's like, I live here, my brother lives somewhere else, we can be in the same race virtually in the app. And that really drove people towards it. Like that's when I talk about launch campaign. That's a launch campaign, right? And that drove something like 500 users into the platform just on that. And we hadn't even planned it. We just talked about it. And I got 500 people interested. So that's the kind of stuff that you want to be doing to be able to get there. Right. Celia, thank you for the like. I really appreciate you doing so. I hope that was useful to you. Same with everybody else. I think I've got Mazzy, full stack engineer. I hope that was useful. I think you came quite late, but I do hope that was useful to you. But I will say, if you do go to, if you want to know more of my stuff, and I don't know if I can post a link in the chat, I will try and do this. Let's see what happens. But if you want to see all of my content and when I'm doing things, that includes that includes webinars and talks. I do a lot of stuff online. Everything goes into this thing called DOM scrolling, and this is free. It's just a digest of my week of all the content I create. So all the long form content, you know, some of my thoughts, some of my market analysis, my short form content, you know, and what's going on. So I have a co-working club on Fridays, for example, and this Tuesday deep dive right here. There you go. But if I'm ever doing this, then that's it. chuffduckcoaching.com/dom scrolling. That's where you can find that. But that's essentially where all my stuff is. And if you do /dom-maurice, then you get all my links. But I will try and figure out a way of sharing the previous lives as well. Right, I need to go to the gym, but it's been lovely to talk to you folks. I hope that you took some value away from that, and that this stream was useful to you as well. And best of luck with all of your endeavors. We can do it. You can do it. We can all do it. And the future is independent tech. So we have to do it. Okay. Have a good one. See you next week, maybe. Tuesday, 12 o'clock. Every Tuesday, 12 o'clock. Tuesday Deep Dive. Products, go to market for all people who are looking to become technical founders. All right. In a bit. Bye.
A female professor gives us the playbook on how to